Alright, good morning. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and this is the second part of the build video on the Boujee backpack. And what we're going to do today is tool the lattice pattern on the body of the bag. Okay, so all this lattice work right here, we're going to tool it. I'll show you the really easy way that I get the wood grain look. Extremely simple, nothing to it. But we're not going to cut it out yet. I want to antique the wood grain look part before I cut it out, because if I antique it afterward, if I cut it out first and then I antique it, antique just gets everywhere, going through the holes, getting on the backs of the leather. It's just a huge mess. So I've learned through lots of trial and error that it's just easier to go ahead and antique it last. So let's get to it. So I've got my piece of leather here, okay, and I've got my pattern. All right, I'm not going to do the overhead camera this morning. I'm just going to bring this one down, just because this is a big area we're working with. Get everything out of the way here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. This is a very gnarly looking piece of leather. Like, it's not a perfect piece of leather by any means, and that's okay, because again, we're making a wood grain look, and last time I checked, I didn't see any perfect lattice work in anybody's garden. So I'm going to spray it down with my water right quick. Okay, now again, I explained this in the first video, but as I was working on the pattern for this bag, originally I had the lattice work wrapping around the bottom of the bag here. Okay, and then I decided that that's a bad idea, because some of my swivel knife cuts then ended up kind of being in a curve of the bottom, and I don't like that. I mean, to me, over time, that can create a weak spot, and we don't want weak spots, right? So, we got my pattern. To avoid that, I just shortened the lattice work pattern by several inches. Actually, it would have gone down to about here, where my pinky is, but now it's up here, and I think that'll take care of that. Okay, I need to find me a stylus. Manually traced anything in a long time. I don't have a stylus. I don't know where it is. When I say I hadn't manually traced anything, anytime I'm going to tool more than one thing, or something more than once, which, you know, all the mystery boxes, stuff like that, I tooled them several times. I get on my laser and make me a what we used to call a pattern rub, similar to like Tandy has craft aids. See how it's got the raised areas and stuff. We used to make these in the store, but they take a really, really long time to make, and it took up way too many man hours and too much laser time. Okay, and we've got way too many templates to make, and we just can't spend all that laser time because nobody would like for me to charge them what it would actually really cost this business to produce those anymore. So yeah, because when you're trying to sell those for about 15-20 bucks, everybody's okay with that. But when it takes 3 hours to make, well. Alright, so I'm going to use a ruler on all my straight lines, okay? I'm just going to put the ruler up there with it and draw my line right there through the paper. Okay, I'll move down here to this other end. I'm going to do the same dang thing. Okay, and I'm going to do the same on all the lattice work. I'm just going to use a ruler as my to help me keep everything nice and straight, and you know, every little detail ends up being part of the final product. So if you're tracing lines, if your traced lines are straight, then your cuts will be more straight. If your cuts are more straight, then your bevels will be more straight. and so therefore. Okay. So you notice I didn't do the curved parts of my border, and there's a simple reason to that. Honestly, I'm just going to use a wing divider and do that, and actually use the edge of the project as my guide on that. Okay. Be very careful as you're doing this, especially if you're using a ruler like I am, because it can cover up some of this. But there is an over-under pattern with this lattice, okay? It was very difficult for me to draw because there's the over-under pattern, and then there's spaces, the blank spaces that we're going to cut out. And I can easily draw an over-under pattern, but when I add those spaces in there, like, it just sends my head into a pot of craziness, I guess, because it's very hard for me to imagine. So when I'm designing something like this on like Adobe Illustrator, I actually have to like do colored squares and stuff to represent the cutouts, just so that I can see them better and I don't accidentally include them into my over-under pattern. Even as I'm tracing this, I'm like, man, did I do this right? But I know I did, because I've already tooled it 2 times. Alright. So there's all of them going one direction. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully spin the leather, making sure the pattern doesn't move on it, okay? And that way I can easily draw my other lines, alright? I would rather have the leather in a comfortable position where I can see the lines and everything, and easily follow them with my ruler and my stylus, than try to do it in an awkward position or anything like that. I get a lot of people asking me about, when I trace something directly through the paper like I am. I know a lot of people use, fancy vellum papers, or, something off there's printing papers that you can use and things like that, or the tracing film. I used to use stuff like that, and honestly, part of it's from, back when having printers wasn't as, like everybody didn't have a printer. I didn't have a printer at my house. I'd have to print something at work to take home and trace and stuff. And so back then, you were having to take your printed pattern, trace it onto tracing paper, then trace it onto the leather. And I'm lazy, and I didn't want to do that 3 times. So I learned how to just take a piece of printed paper, put it on my leather, make sure the leather's not too wet, of course, because that'll just rip up your paper. And then as long as you're always pulling your stylus towards you and not trying to push it away from you, then generally you're not going to rip up the paper and all that craziness. If I was using a pattern, more than once, I would put clear tape on the back of it before I did this, or laminate it if you had those capabilities. And that worked great. All right, just a couple more lines here. Beautiful. All right. There it is in all its glory. Okay. Now again, I'm going to take my wing dividers. As soon as I see, there they are. I've got another pair laying around up here somewhere that I would prefer to use on this. Or maybe I don't. All right. I'm going to take my wing dividers. And I'll do it on the paper first, just to kind of get a general guideline where I need to be. That's pretty close. Then I'll fine tune them on the leather. Actually, that's pretty good. All right. Now I'll just draw my border lines with these. Alrighty, we're ready. So, put my little reading glasses on here. Okay, so now I'm going to take my swivel knife and my strap board. Where did my strap board go? Alright, someone move my strap board. I'll be right back. Alright, I found it. Now, I'm going to maintain the fact that someone else must have moved it because it was hanging where it was supposed to be hanging. And God knows that probably wasn't me. So, problem was it was turned over, and so I couldn't see the green that I was looking for, I guess. You know how it is. Come on now. We've all lost something that we were holding in our hand. Alright, so, very simple to cut. Okay? I'm going to start with my borders, and then I'm going to move in and do the lattice work. If you're not very good with a swivel knife to pull straight lines, you can use your ruler for that too. Alright, so real quick, I'm going to go ahead and do my border, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, even on the straight lines on my border, I can do this. So, I'll grab my ruler, put it up there on that line. Now, you want to make sure, of course, that it's backed off the line just a tiny bit, maybe like a 1/16th or a 32nd of an inch. Put your swivel knife up to it and pull. Don't let that ruler move, though. Okay? And there you go. Nice straight line. Pulled against a ruler so that it's just as straight as it can be, as long as you don't let the ruler move. Okay? I can't stress that enough. Alright, so I'm going to do the exact same thing on the lattice work, being very cognizant, once again, being very aware of where it goes over and under. Especially if you're going to use a ruler, you can accidentally cover those areas up and you can get yourself in trouble. Where a line comes up to a line that is going to go over it, I stop just a little bit short. Don't cut all the way to the line because you risk over cutting the line. And then we can take care of the rest of that later with bevelers and our wood chisel that we're going to cut out the background with. So, again, just going to put my ruler up here. It helps if you have a ruler that has other, it's clear, or, one of our blue rulers, because then you can see the next lines too and make sure that you really are nice and parallel to them, because you can think that you're straight on here, and then you go down to your next line and you look and you're like, one of those two lines is not parallel. It just doesn't look right, So. So yeah, I'm going to cut a couple of these out, and then I'm going to pause the camera, and I'll cut all of them out. So even now, after I've drawn the pattern on directly from the tracing and everything, I still look at it and like, was I supposed to cross that line? It gets confusing for me. I don't, again, over and under is not hard for me. Over and under with spaces in between just screws my head up. Anyway, alright, I'm going to cut out the rest of this. When we come back, I'll start beveling and working on the lattice work. Alrighty then. So, got that done. Now, before I start beveling, I'm actually going to draw my next line around my border, okay? because I need to, or I like to have it cut before I bevel the first one. I don't know why, that's just my preference, and I don't think there's an actual rule to it. There's probably not even any logic to it. It's just what I like to do. And that's pretty common, me doing things that have no logic to them. Alright, so I'm just creating a beaded type line. I don't know, it's 1/8 of an inch wide maybe. And on the top and bottom, I'll just draw them in with a ruler, because they'll be a little bit different than they were on the edges. Alrighty. Cut that out right quick, and then we're going to start beveling. And on this, we're going to do the exact same border that we did on the flap. Okay, so that wide border that had like 3 or 4 different iterations to it, yep, that's what we're doing. Okay, top and the bottom right quick. Alrighty, now I'm going to use my push beveler on the inside of the border, okay? And just like we discussed in the last video, I'm going to kind of pull it instead of pushing it. Once again, I like to break the rules, right? I'd heard the quote before, maybe I'm going to push, I don't know. Some leathers it's easier to pull, some it's easier to push. Some it's easier just to get mad. I'd heard the quote before, but not long ago, Don Gonzalez posted on his Instagram the quote of, you know, you must learn the rules before you can break them. It's, when you think about it and what it really means, that's very true. Learn the basics of something and then make it your own. Oh, and speaking of that, on our first video, the introduction of this bag, I had somebody has gotten on there and commented that I took a pattern off of the free Tandy website, changed the name, and now I'm charging people for it. So looked it up, and Tandy does have a variation of this bag, which, okay, so do lots of other people. However, theirs is built a lot like a giant stirrup bag. And so yeah, this pattern and that pattern are nothing alike, other than they're both bags made out of 2 separate kinds of leather that you wear on your back. So anyway, I don't think that someone accused me of stealing that is what made me mad as much as she told me that I also claim to be a veteran, and that is not honorable behavior as of claiming to be a veteran. Oh well. Can't please them all, can we? Alright, so I did that with the push beveler right quick. Now I'm just going to take my normal beveler and I'm going to bevel down. And the only areas, like the beveling goes pretty quick on this, because the only areas I'm beveling is where one of them crosses over another. Okay? And to keep it fast and simple, I'll do all the beveling this side, then I'll turn it and do all the beveling a different angle. But as opposed to trying to just follow one piece of wood all the way across, This just makes it a lot easier to go quicker. So again, every time my bevelers, or I'm doing all the ones where my beveler would face this way, now I'll rotate it and do any of them where my beveler would face a different direction. Like this way. Turn it a different direction and do all the beveling that direction now. And again, I'm just doing where it goes under another stick or a piece of wood, whatever. Because why bevel that entire line when I'm just going to cut it out later and it won't matter? You may be asking yourself, why didn't I just use my push beveler on these areas? I could, but I want the texture. This is a checkered beveler, and I want the checkering. Because when I antique this, I want it to show shading where one piece of wood goes under another. Alright, it's all beveled. There it is. Wasn't that fun? Only took a minute or two. Alright, now I am going to go back and I'm going to use the leaf liner that we used in the last video. Okay, a little trapezoid shaped tool. Again, Tandy back in the day made one. I don't remember the tool numbers, but it was a beveler, and there were two of them. One had an L on it and one had an R on it, and it was the left and right for angled lines that were on this beveler, and they were for things like this right here. But I like to use a leaf liner because it's one tool. I don't have to keep up with two of them, and also I can look at it and decide which way I need to go and not have to sit and stare at one of the tools and figure out which way it's going to face. Okay, now how am I going to use my leaf liner on this project is I'm going to take it just like I would do on a leaf. I'm going to take it. Now, this leaf liner, I believe, has a 30-degree angle to it on the trapezoid shapes, okay? Well, unfortunately, my tooling pattern has a bit more of an angle. Or maybe it's less, yeah, more of an angle. Mine, I think this is about I don't know, 60 degree? I don't know. I'm not very good at that. So anyway, so what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to hold it to where it runs parallel to the piece of wood that I'm tooling, and not necessarily hold it to where the trapezoid shape is up against the line I'm going across. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to walk it along, and there's what we end up with. See those lines? Hopefully. Alright, and then when I turn it around, I'll do the exact same thing, go in the other direction. See if I can angle this to where you see it more. There we go. Alright, so it'll give the appearance of that piece of wood kind of squeezing behind the other there and have more shading to it. I'm going to do that at all of these intersections. Okay, it won't take me but a couple of minutes, but it's a couple of minutes you don't have to stare at me or listen to me. So pause the camera. When I come back, they'll all be done like that. Alrighty, so that's done. There it is. Okay, I'm looking at my computer screen because one thing I've found when I'm tooling something, I look at it and I'm like, it's done. But then I'll take a picture of it and I'll look at the picture and I'll immediately find something else I should have done, whether it was just a spot that didn't get covered with texture or a flower that didn't get swivel cuts, something like that. But that's how I've always, and I noticed that because I used to post stuff on Instagram without doing that, and someone would bring it up to me. They'd be like, hey, you forgot this right here. And I'm like, wow, it's blatantly obvious in that picture, but it wasn't when I was just staring at it. So anyway, I digress. All right, so now how are we going to do our wood texturing? All right, spray her a little bit more with water, not a lot, just a little. I'm just going to take a modeling spoon here. Okay, modeling spoon. This is a Peter Main modeling spoon that you can get from, you guessed it, Peter Main. Anyway, I'm going to take a Peter Main modeling spoon, and here's how crazy and creative I'm going to get with my wood grain. Just going to draw a bunch of squiggly lines. I want to make sure they're not all even, they don't all look the same, they don't all, I mean, they need to flow together, but they don't need to, you know, you don't want it to look like they're all perfectly parallel in their flow. Alright? See if I can capture that correctly in the light. Anyway, I'm going to do that on all of this, and then I'm going to come back with a swivel knife and just kind of trace a couple of them. And with the swivel knife, I'll let it fade in and out a little bit. Some will be lighter, some will be heavier, things like that. And when you antique all that, it'll look like some really nice wood grain. Okay? So, and then even once in a while, I'll turn it around and use the other end of the swivel knife, because they both have a different sharpness to them, and so they will both draw different lines. And then sometimes I'll even flip it over so the spoon's facing the other way. It all makes for a different look and a different line. I am pressing pretty hard because I really want to, you know, get these in there. I want them to catch that antique, and I want them to be bold. Okay? So it might take me a while because my hand's going to cramp up and stuff. As I keep doing it, I'll even doubt myself, like, oh, is there too many lines on that one? Is there not enough on that other one? It's wood. It's natural. It's all different. It's okay. Okay? So I am actually going to stop the video at this point, but the other things I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the border on this, which if you watched the last video, you know how I did my border, or you can do any kind of other border you might want to do. But I'm going to do the exact same border on this as I did on that. So there will be a lot to it. Okay? And then I'm going to do the exact same border on the yoke piece up here that holds the thingy for the straps. Okay? But this is it for today's video. I wanted to show you how I do my lattice work, how I do my wood on the lattice work, and yeah. Again, I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and have some fun with it. We'll talk to you soon.